Stop acting obsolete, Jackie. 8 minutes is nothing. Hit cycle start or get off my floor. Foreman Trent Holloway shouted it across mold line 3 at 542, loud enough to ride over furnace fans and the hydraulic whine of the breakout carriage. The sentence hit the bay harder than the overhead crane brakes. By the time the words cleared the steam haze, the cost was already written in numbers nobody on that floor could afford. 138-ton permanent mold casting cell wrecked, 3 workers injured, 11 weeks of lost production, and a quarter's profit burned down for a schedule recovery trick that looked efficient only on a spreadsheet. Jackie Cooper did not flinch, but her jaw locked so hard she felt it in her temples. She was standing at the MES terminal between cavities C6 and C7 with her gloves folded under one arm, safety glasses fogged at the edges from heat radiating off the mold blocks. The robotic pour arm was parked at neutral, ladle clean, ready light steady amber. She knew exactly what Trent wanted and exactly what it would do. 19 years in Ferris foundry operations had taught her to separate noise from signal. She was Level 3 process control certified, qualified on thermal mapping, vent path diagnostics, and mold moisture trending. She made $112,000 a year because she could see failure chains while they still looked like minor deviations on a dashboard. Her value had never been charisma. It had always been prediction. When people liked her, production stayed on target. When people hated her, nothing changed about metallurgy. The line they were arguing over ran 6 medium-frequency induction furnaces, feeding a robotic arm that poured into H13 steel permanent molds. Under normal SOP, each cycle held a 24-minute controlled cool-down before breakout. That duration wasn't a guess, and it wasn't optional. It was calibrated against core coating release temperature, binder outgassing curves, and vent pressure decay. The whole point was to let volatile gases clear before fresh metal arrived with enough thermal energy to turn trapped vapor into force. Trent wanted 16 minutes. He had been hunting minutes since 4 o'clock, when corporate planning sent a revised throughput target after a rail delay at the machining plant upstream. He had been pacing behind stations, tapping his tablet, saying recoverable loss every time a cycle slipped past forecast. He was a schedule man by temperament and by bonus structure. If tonnage hit the weekly number, he got paid. If not, he found someone to blame. Jackie brought up the cavity diagnostics again, because process discipline meant repetition, even when authority got loud. C7 showed a red moisture warning icon, not yellow, red. She zoomed into trend history and saw the same creeping baseline she had flagged on second shift 2 days earlier. At the same time, a hairline heat check crack had appeared near the ejector side of the mold face, barely visible unless the work light struck it at an angle. Alone, either condition demanded caution. Together, with shortened cooling, they were a direct precursor to a pressure event. Trent stepped into her station boundary without asking and stabbed a finger toward the cycle timer. 16 gets us back on plan before 7. You keep stalling and we miss dispatch. I'm not stalling, she said. Her voice stayed level because anger wasted oxygen in a hot bay. C7 is still carrying moisture and the coating temperature is above release range. If we pour into that condition, binder gas has nowhere to go. He gave a short laugh that had no humor in it. It's a mold, Jackie, not a chemistry lab. It is both, she said. If gas can't vent, pressure builds under the casting skin. He leaned closer, invading the console space as if proximity could rewrite thermodynamics. You used to move metal, now you move excuses. Around them, the crew pretended to stay busy. A forklift idled near the flux rack with its reverse alarm muted. 2 riggers at bay, 2 checked shackles that were already checked. Nobody made eye contact for long. Foundry crews knew this pattern. The moment when a technical dispute stopped being technical and turned into a dominance test. At 5:46, the overhead board updated production lag. Minus 21 units against plan. Trent glanced up, saw the red deficit, and changed tone from impatient to punishing. "Direct order," he said. "Set cooldown to 16 and start the next cycle." Jackie touched the terminal but did not execute. She pulled up the SOP instead, section 4.3.2, and rotated the screen so he could read the highlighted line through his own reflection in the glass. Minimum controlled cooldown 24 hours for this alloy family and cavity set. No override, without process engineer sign-off and safety concurrence. He didn't read it. He looked at her. "You hiding behind policy now?" "I'm following policy. There's a difference." He folded his arms. "You are being a coward." That word landed differently than obsolete had. Obsolete was about age. Coward was about character. She felt the old pressure rise in her chest, the one she used to get as a trainee when senior men treated caution like weakness and speed like proof of worth. She had spent years turning that pressure into discipline, building a reputation for being precise when others performed confidence. Hearing it again from a foreman who had never run a full thermal profile himself made her hands go colder inside her gloves. She looked at C7. Then she looked at the crack near the ejector edge. Then she looked at Trent Holloway. "Call me whatever you want," she said. "I can't run 16 on this mold state." His nostrils flared. "Can't or won't?" "Can't. If the binder is still outgassing when metal hits, pressure spikes under the skin, you can get a detonation at breakout." He rolled his eyes toward the operators as if she had delivered theater instead of mechanism. "Listen to this. We're pouring cast iron, not launching rockets." A few people forced tight smiles they did not feel. Nobody laughed out loud. At 5:49, Jackie initiated a formal hold in the MES. The system required reason code, defect category, and operator credential. She entered all 3 with the steady rhythm of someone who'd done this under pressure before. Hold type, thermal safety, trigger, moisture warning, C7 plus surface heat check, crack at ejector side, action, cool down extension to 2400 pending verification. She attached the trend snapshot and the camera still from mold face inspection. Then she hit submit. The terminal chimed and locked cycle start. For 2 seconds there was only a machine noise. Fan belts, coolant circulation, distant scrape of slag rake on refractory lip. Then Trent smiled in a way that meant he had decided this would no longer stay inside procedure. "Lazy and steel-toe boots," he said loud enough for half the bay. "That's what this is." Jackie didn't answer immediately. She watched his right hand move to his supervisor badge, thumb resting near the lanyard clip, calculating. Override authority was supposed to be rare, documented, and jointly witnessed. In practice, it was a power lever. Used right, it kept emergencies from becoming shutdowns. Used wrong, it turned warnings into paperwork and paperwork into injuries. She turned to face him squarely. "If you override this hold, I will log the override ID and timestamp." "Log whatever you want." "I will also notify safety and EHS." "Go ahead." His confidence was not technical, it was hierarchical. He believed he had more insulation than heat ever could burn through. She had seen that belief before in supervisors who treated red icons as interface clutter and seasoned operators as obstacles. The pattern never changed. First came insult, then came dismissal, then came command phrased as urgency. Physics waded through all three stages without debate. A radio crackled from the far end of the line. Mold 3 status? Trent keyed his handset without looking away from Jackie. Minor delay. Correcting now. She keyed her own channel half a second later. Mold 3 under safety hold. Thermal condition unresolved. He snapped his head toward her. You don't run comms over me. I run safety over everyone. By 0552, the bay temperature had climbed another few degrees as Furnace 6 tipped into hold power stabilization. Heat shimmered above the mold deck, bending light over the guardrails. Jackie could smell the sweet, bitter note of core binder residue in the exhaust stream, faint but present. That smell should have been gone at this stage. It was not gone. She felt the technical alarm settle into certainty. Trent took one step closer, voice now clipped and quiet, meant for her alone. You're done on this line if you keep this up. She met his stare and heard her own breathing through the ear cups of her helmet. If that's your call, make it in writing. He leaned back, volume rising again for the floor audience he wanted. Everyone hearing this? One. We're late because Jackie thinks she's the only adult in the building. No one answered. A ladle car clanked over expansion joints in the next bay, metal against metal. A hard industrial echo that made the silence sharper. At 5:54, the MES hold remained active on the screen between them, red border pulsing. Jackie could feel the social isolation of doing the correct thing in front of people who depended on overtime and feared retaliation. And she carried it anyway. Her authority came from thresholds, from vent flow and cooling curves, from all the ugly lessons buried in old incident reports. She would take anger over ambulance lights every shift of her life. Trent gave the terminal one last contemptuous look, then pointed past her shoulder toward the cycle controls. Move, he said. She stayed where she was. He barked a laugh and shook his head as if her refusal confirmed his script. Obsolete and lazy, that's your whole resume now. The insult hung over the mold floor, hotter than the furnaces, while the red icon on C7 kept flashing like a metronome no one in authority wanted to hear. Jackie kept her eyes on the C7 icon until the flash cycle synced with her breathing. One pulse every second. Red square to dark to red again. The system's plain way of saying moisture threshold exceeded and still climbing. She reached past Trent without touching him and opened the raw diagnostics pane that supervisors almost never used because it showed numbers instead of colors. C7 core humidity sat at 0.38% by mass. The hard stop in their procedure was 0.22. C6 was at 0.19, C5 at 0.21. But C7 had been drifting upward for 42 minutes, despite active exhaust. She expanded the trend and watched the curve flatten, then hook upward again. That shape mattered. A linear rise could mean transient steam from wash. A hook meant trapped moisture finding hot paths through coating and rebounding into the cavity. She did not need a debate to know what that did when molten iron arrived at over 1,300 degrees Celsius. Water did not stay water at that temperature. It became volume and force. She pulled her handheld IR pyrometer from her belt pouch, thumbed it on, and aimed at 3 points along the ejector side where the heat check crack had appeared. The laser dot jittered over oxidized steel, then stabilized. 289 Celsius at the outer face, 296 at the crack shoulder, 302 at the corner nearest the vent throat. Release range for that coating system was 240 to 260, and that range assumed normal vent draw. She swept to the mold crown and got 273. She swept to the parting line and got 281. Nothing on that face had shed heat as designed. Her visor fogged lightly from radiant lift as she leaned in, then cleared when she straightened. Eli Ramos stood 2 stations over with his gloves half on, half off, watching her screen and pretending he wasn't. He was 24, 6 months into permanent assignment, sharp on routine and still uncertain when routine broke. Jackie didn't look at him when she spoke. Eli, grab the contact probe kit from the Met cart. Type K leads, long cables. He hesitated a fraction. You want cavity temp or shell? Both. And bring the smoke pencil. He moved quickly, relief visible in the way his shoulders settled once he had a specific task. Work was easier than choosing sides. Jackie appreciated that because she had been him once, back when she still thought clear warnings protected you from retaliation. Trent stayed close enough to hear every word, arms crossed, face set in an expression that tried to make procedure look theatrical. He said nothing, and his silence carried more pressure than his shouting. She ignored it and opened vent telemetry. The manifold readout for line 3 split into 6 channels, 1 per cavity. Under healthy conditions, each channel should have shown similar negative pressure during purge, then a smooth decay curve to baseline as volatiles cleared. C7 was lagging by 18 kilopascals. C4 and C5 were lagging by 9 and 11. The rest were near nominal. Uneven draw across 3 cavities on the same manifold was not random noise. It meant partial obstruction, cracked seals, or both. Jackie switched to the last maintenance work order and found the note she expected. Manifold replacement deferred pending budget window. Deferred meant known and tolerated. Tolerated meant margin consumed quietly, 1 decision at a time. At 5:56, Eli returned with the kit and held it out like an offering. Jackie took the probes, clipped 1 to the ejector side boss, another to the runner support, and a third to the outer shell rib. The meter settled after 10 seconds. 294, 287, 271. Delta too high. She threaded the smoke pencil nozzle near vent port 7 and squeezed. The white stream should have snapped inward if draw was healthy. Instead, it wandered, stalled, then curled sideways along the mold face before disappearing in a lazy ribbon. She moved to vent port 6, strong pull, port 5, weak, port 4, moderate. She repeated each test twice because 1 pass could lie and repetition usually did not. C7 stayed weak both times. Could be sensor drift, Eli said, voice low enough that Trent might not catch it. Then we prove it, Jackie replied. She handed Eli the pyrometer and pointed to the same 3 marks. Read them yourself. He read them 1 by 1, numbers within 3 degrees of hers. Drift was not the problem. She crouched by the vent drain trap and touched the line with the back of her glove. Warm and damp. She opened the petcock into a sample cup. A thin mix of condensate and dark binder residue dribbled out, more liquid than there should have been at that phase of cycle. She held the cup under the task light. Tiny bubbles broke at the surface. carrying a sweet, solvent-like odor that sat under the iron smell and refused to dissipate. Trent finally spoke. "You done with your science fair?" Jackie did not turn. "No, we're still verifying hazard state." He gave a dry laugh. "Hazard state. You hear that?" He said it toward nobody and everybody, a performance for the floor. "We have orders to ship, and she's writing poetry." She stood, sample cup in one hand, probe meter in the other. "This cup says volatile carryover is still active. The vent draw says C7 can't clear it. The face temperature says coating releases above safe window. Those three together are not poetry." He tilted his head. "Then explain it for people who actually move production." She obliged, because translation was part of keeping people alive. If binder keeps outgassing after pour and vents can't evacuate fast enough, gas pockets form under the casting skin. During breakout, those pockets can rupture the shell. Rupture plus superheated gas equals blast risk at operator distance. That is why 24 minutes exists. A rigger at Bay 2, Mark Delaney, stopped checking his sling and listened openly now. So did Nia from Quality, standing near the hardness station with her tablet frozen mid-entry. They had both been through incident refresher modules where anonymized photos replaced names. Jackie could see recognition in their faces, not panic exactly, but that sober recalculation Cruz made when a routine task turned conditional. She keyed her radio to maintenance control. "Maintenance desk, this is Cooper at mold line 3. Request immediate vent manifold differential check. C7 draw degraded and moisture threshold red." Static answered first, then a dispatcher voice. "Copy, Cooper. Earliest tech arrival 12 minutes. We are tied up at furnace 2 pump seal." 12 is too long for release decision, Jackie said. "Need remote review now. Pull line 3 vent trend, last 60. Stand by." Trent leaned close enough that only she heard him. "You're making a scene." "I'm making a record." He stepped back, jaw tight. "Record this. Line doesn't run, people go home early, that's on you." Jackie looked past him at the crew. Nobody looked eager to go home unpaid. Nobody looked eager to gamble on a cavity warning either. Foundry economics lived in those faces more than in executive dashboards. She kept her tone neutral. Downtime hurts. Injuries hurt more. Asset loss hurts longest. The maintenance dispatcher came back on radio. "Cooper, remote confirms asymmetric draw line 3. Channels 4, 5, 7 below expected by double digits. Suggest inspect manifold branch and vent seats before next pour." "Received," Jackie said. "Log that under WO-L3-1187. Logged. That one exchange mattered because it moved the alarm from operator judgment to system corroboration. Jackie reopened MES hold notes and added the exact phrasing, timestamp included, while Eli read probe temperatures allowed for witness confirmation. She entered those too. Trent watched her type as though each keystroke cost him personally. Nia walked over from Quality with a compact borescope case. "You want visual on the crack?" she asked. "Yes, thanks." Nia fed the scope tip along the ejector side seam where the heat check line showed its surface. The screen displayed bright metal, scale patches, and then the fissure, thin as a hair at first, widening where thermal cycling had eaten deeper into the edge. Jackie froze the frame and tagged it. Crack length was 42 millimeters visible, with branching at one end. Not a catastrophic structural break by itself, but in combination with elevated face temperature and poor venting, It increased leak paths and local stress concentration. She captured 3 stills and attached them to the hold package. Eli pointed to the borescope image. That branch wasn't there on Tuesday. It was smaller, Jackie said. Now it's active. How can you tell? Color and edge texture. Fresh heat checking reflects differently. See the lighter lip? That's recent propagation. He squinted, then nodded slowly. Learning landed on him in layers, the way it did for most operators. First the rule, then the reason, then the pattern memory that stayed with you years later. Jackie wanted him to keep that memory without paying for it in pain. A sharp metallic ping rang from inside the mold as internal components contracted unevenly. One ping alone meant little. 3 in close sequence meant temperature gradients were still aggressive across the block. Jackie heard 2 more within 15 seconds. She checked the contact probes again. Values were drifting down, but too slowly, and the spread between points remained high. She did the quick calculation in her head. At current cooling slope, C7 would still sit above release range at 16 minutes by roughly 23 to 28 degrees. That was enough to keep binder breakdown active during the next pour. At 5:59, she overlaid current cycle against 3 historical safe cycles from last month. The visual made the argument cleaner than any speech. In safe runs, humidity peaked early, then decayed below 0.20 before minute 20. In this run, C7 crossed 0.30 at minute 14 and stayed there past minute 22. Vent pressure in safe runs recovered to baseline smoothly. Today it plateaued high. Temperature deltas in safe runs narrowed by minute 18. Today they stayed wide past minute 20. 3 independent systems telling one story. She rotated the monitor so the nearest operators could see. This is why we hold. Mark Delaney frowned at the chart. If we wait full 24, does it clear? Maybe, Jackie said. Depends on vent condition. If manifold branch is fouled, even 24 could be marginal on C7. That's why we inspect before next pour. Nia tapped her stylus against the borescope case. We should lock out C7 cavity and run reduced pattern if schedule screams. Trent snapped his head toward her. Your quality, not operations. She met his stare evenly. And defects become returns, which become operations pain. Same building. For the first time, Trent looked less angry than cornered. Not persuaded, not reflective, just aware that the discussion had moved from one operator's refusal to a cluster of converging data points. Hierarchy worked best against isolated dissent. It worked poorly against instrument agreement. Jackie removed her gloves, wiped sweat from her palms with a clean rag, and put the gloves back on. Tiny motions kept her steady. The bay remained loud, hot, relentlessly ordinary in all the ways that made catastrophic errors so common. Same lights, same rails, same cycle screen, one altered parameter. She set the sample cup on the stainless tray, labeled it L3-C7-0559, sealed it, and placed it in the evidence locker at the console. Chain of custody was not dramatic, but it prevented arguments later about contamination or fabrication. She keyed radio again, this time to Shift Safety Officer Dana Liu. Dana, Cooper on line 3. Active thermal safety hold remains. We have red moisture C7. Degraded vent draw, verified by maintenance remote, elevated face temperatures above release range, and active heat check propagation at ejector side. Request in-person safety witness. Dana answered without delay. On my way from Bay 1, 3 minutes. Copy. Trent exhaled hard through his nose. You called safety now. I called safety when safety criteria were met. He glanced at the overhead board where production lag had deepened another unit. The red numbers were bait for men like him. Jackie knew the pattern so well it felt scripted. Scoreboard pressure, procedural resistance, authority assertion, then the temptation to bypass. The difference between a close call and a case file often came down to whether someone documented the hazard before the bypass happened. Dana arrived at 6:02 in a silver hard hat with orange striping, tablet tucked under one arm. She listened first, asked concise questions, then repeated each reading herself, including a fresh smoke pencil test and independent pyrometer checks. Her numbers matched within tolerance. She reviewed the bore scope images, sampled the vent drain, and signed the hold witness block. Hold is valid, she said plainly. No pour authorization at 16. No breakout authorization until thermal and vent criteria are within SOP. She said it loud enough for the nearby crew and for Trent. The mold line kept humming around them. Conveyors indexing empty pallets. Furnace fans pushing heat across steel and concrete. Alarms from distant bays chirping and clearing in routine rhythm. Inside that noise, the hazard sat fully identified now. No longer a judgment call, no longer personality conflict. Red moisture warning, weak vent draw, elevated release temperatures, active crack growth, condensate carryover. 5 indicators, 1 direction. Jackie looked at the C7 icon as it flashed again and felt the hard calm that came when data closed every exit except the right one. Physics had already submitted its requirements. The only question left was whether management would read them. Trent did read them, and he chose to treat every one of them as a negotiation point. He stepped in beside Dana's tablet, scanned the witness block, and gave a thin smile that carried more contempt than surprise. Noted, he said. Now clear the hold. Dana didn't move. I just validated the hold. You validated delay, Trent snapped. I'm validating production. Jackie answered before Dana had to. Production is not valid if vent flow is degraded and outgassing is active. You pour into that cavity, gas stays trapped under the skin. At breakout, pressure release can rupture the shell. He turned to her with both palms open, mock patience. You've said that 6 times. I'll say it 7 if you still plan to ignore it. The exchange pulled more of the crew into a loose half circle that pretended not to be a circle. No one crossed the painted station boundary, but no one walked away either. In foundry work, people learned to hear what mattered through machinery. The difference between normal argument and pre-incident argument. This was pre-incident. Trent pointed at the cycle timer on the overhead screen. We are 19 minutes behind the first hour target and bleeding into the second hour dispatch window. Corporate doesn't pay us to run textbook perfect labs. They pay us to ship castings. Jackie kept her voice level, every word clipped to mechanism. The textbook is written from failure reports. This line runs molten iron at over 1300 Celsius into a cavity that currently cannot vent at design draw. At 16 minutes, coating on C7 is still above release window. That combination is how pressure events start. He took one step closer, chin up, forcing eye contact. Then spell out your magic chain again for the class. She did. When cooling is cut, binder decomposition continues during pour. That produces gas. If vent manifold draw is uneven, Gas accumulation rises at local hot zones. The outer shell forms first because it contacts the mold face. Gas pockets grow underneath that shell. Breakout introduces vibration and mechanical stress. Shell cracks, gas flashes, and fragments eject. That's not theory, that's sequence. Mark Delaney muttered, almost to himself. Same module they showed after Cedar Point plant, right? Jackie nodded once. Same mechanism, different alloy family, same failure chain. Trent pivoted to Mark. You running line 3 now? No. Then stay on your rigging. Mark returned to his station, jaw tight, while Trent swung back to Jackie and Dana. I'm done with debate. Dana, remove your witness block and set this as advisory. Jackie, set cooldown to 16 and cycle start. Dana shook her head. Safety witness entries are non-retractable once submitted. Then amend it. Amendment requires changed condition. Condition has not changed. A furnace fan kicked to high and rattled sheet metal cladding overhead, and in that noise Trent's restraint thinned. You two are building paperwork to cover yourselves while my line stalls. Jackie tapped the monitor and pulled up the live trend traces side by side, then pointed one by one. Humidity above threshold. Vent pressure lag on 3 channels. Surface temperatures out of release range. Fresh crack propagation. Condensate carryover in the drain sample. You can call it paperwork. Physics will call it pressure. He stared at the traces and said the line she had expected all morning. I am giving you a direct order. She answered just as quickly. I am refusing an unsafe order. The words landed hard because everyone heard the exact stakes in that form. Refusal in writing meant discipline risk. Compliance meant blast risk. There was no middle ground left. Trent folded his arms and shifted tone from aggressive to administrative, which was often worse. State your refusal for the record. Jackie faced the camera dome above the console and spoke clearly. Operator Jackie Cooper, Level 3 Process Control, refusing to initiate 16-minute cycle on mold line 3 due to unresolved thermal and vent hazards. Specific mechanism. Active binder outgassing plus insufficient vent evacuation may cause pressure accumulation beneath casting skin and rupture during breakout. Dana raised her tablet and added, Safety Officer Dana Liu confirming hazard criteria remain above SOP limits. Trent gave a short laugh. You both rehearsed that? Jackie ignored the bait. You asked for the record. You got the record. He looked at the overhead board again, then back at her, decision settling behind his eyes like a lock engaging. You think this place runs on fear of red icons. It runs on accountability. Then be accountable to the standard. I'm accountable to output. Output without controls is scrap at best. For a brief second, the only sound came from the vent stack, pulsing through its purge rhythm, low and uneven like a cough that wouldn't clear. Trent heard it too. Jackie saw it in the flicker of his gaze toward port 7. He dismissed it anyway. She leaned over the console, opened the SOP window again, and read the operative sentence aloud. Not for him now, but for every operator in range. No override without process engineer sign-off and safety concurrence when moisture warning is read and vent differential exceeds 10 kilopascals. Trent cut in. And where is process engineering at 6 in the morning? At home, sleeping, while we eat penalties. Jackie did not raise her voice. Then we wait, inspect, and restart safely. 12 minutes for maintenance arrival. If branch blockage is confirmed, isolate cavity and run reduced pattern. That costs units. It saves people. He gave her a long stare meant to force retreat. She held it without blinking and felt the old fear in her chest steady into something harder, the practiced discipline that had kept her alive for 19 years. She was not braver than anyone else on that floor. She was simply done pretending hazard language was optional when production got tight. Trent jabbed a finger toward the green cycle button. Hit it. No. Hit it now. No. He stepped so close she could smell mint gum over hot oil and iron. You want to keep this job, Cooper? I want everyone on this line to go home intact. That is not what I asked. It is the only answer that matters. At 6:05, Dana's tablet chimed with the safety log confirmation upload. Jackie heard the tone and felt the consequence lock in. The hold, witness, remote maintenance corroboration, and refusal statement were now archived on the corporate server, time-stamped and immutable without audit trail. That quiet software event carried no siren, no strobe, no visible drama. It was still the hinge that would matter later. Trent heard the chime too, and his expression changed from contempt to calculation. He pulled his radio from his chest clip and keyed Plant Ops channel. Ops Desk Holloway. Line 3 obstruction by operator refusal. Request labor reassignment authorization. A pause. Static. Then a dispatcher voice. Clarify obstruction type. He looked straight at Jackie while he answered. Insubordination delaying critical throughput. Jackie keyed in over him on safety channel, careful not to overlap frequencies. Cooper, line 3, note for log. Refusal tied to documented thermal and vent hazard per SOP. Safety officer present and concurs. Trent glared. You just undermined chain of command. She met his glare with the same even tone. I preserved chain of evidence. The ops dispatcher came back. Holloway. Labor reassignment at supervisor discretion. Document reason code. Copy, he said. Reason code insubordination. Dana spoke before he could pocket the radio. If you mark insubordination without referencing active safety hold, that code is incomplete. He snapped. I don't need your coaching. You do if you want an accurate report. He ignored her and turned toward Eli, who had frozen near the Met cart with the pyrometer still in hand. Ramos on deck. You're taking this station. Eli looked at Jackie first, then at Dana, then at Trent. The hesitation lasted less than a second, but felt longer. Sir, the hold is still red. Trent barked. I didn't ask for an interpretation. I gave an assignment. Eli swallowed. Yes, sir. Jackie stepped half a pace toward him, palms open, not touching. Eli, listen carefully. If anyone directs you to run at 16, request written confirmation in MES notes and state hazard conditions on comms before touching start. Don't skip that. Trent cut between them. Stop coaching him against supervision. I'm giving procedural instruction. You're contaminating my operator. Your operator deserves the same facts I had. Eli's face had gone pale under the grime at his temples. Ms. Cooper, if I refuse to, Trent shouted over him. You won't. Dana raised her voice for the first time. No one is required to execute a task that violates documented safety criteria. Trent swung on her. And no one is required to stay employed if they block lawful operations. That sentence settled over the station like dust after a dropped mold half. Crew members looked down at boots, tools, clipboards, anywhere except each other. This was the familiar weapon. Convert hazard discussion into livelihood threat, then watch who folds first. Jackie knew she was the primary target, so she made herself the clearest one. If discipline is coming, put my name on it. Leave him out of this. Trent smiled without warmth. You don't get to negotiate who gets consequences. She held his stare. Then I'll repeat for the record. I refused, because the mechanism predicts a pressure event under current parameters. I provided data, witness confirmation, and mitigation options. You provided delay. I provided prevention. He pulled his phone, opened the supervisor portal, and began speaking while typing, voice loud enough to carry. Employee Jackie Cooper removed from active line duty pending conduct review. Temporary replacement assigned. Cycle target unchanged. Dana said, "You can remove duty. You cannot erase hazard status. Watch me." He took a step to the supervisor console mounted on the post behind Jackie's station. A smaller interface with override functions, blocked on standard operator terminals. He tapped in credentials, then scanned his badge. The screen flashed amber. Override menu accessed. A prompt appeared requiring reason selection and second-party acknowledgement for lock bypass. He selected Production Recovery Override. Second-party acknowledgement remained blank. Dana moved beside him. "I will not co-sign." Not required for supervisory emergency authority. That clause applies to evacuation, fire suppression, and life safety continuity, not schedule. Interpret it however you want. He tapped through to alarm suppression and entered a 6-digit code. The C7 icon at Jackie's terminal changed from pulsing red to steady amber with a small superscript, OVR tag. The humidity value did not change. The temperature values did not change. The vent differential did not change. Only the color changed. Jackie felt a cold line run down her spine despite the heat. "You can mute the alarm state," she said quietly. "You can't mute the condition." Trent answered without looking at her. Condition is now managed. Managed by what corrective action? Managed by moving metal. Dana recorded the override screen with her tablet camera, framed tight enough to capture timestamp, user ID, and reason code. Trent noticed and lifted his chin. "Film all you want." "I intend to," she said. At 6:08, he pointed to the yellow boundary stripe at the edge of the station. "Cooper, step off the controls." Jackie did not move for a heartbeat. Then she logged out of her operator profile, removed her access token, and placed it on the console where the camera could see. She stepped back behind the boundary line and stood with hands at her sides. The move looked like surrender to anyone who mistook position for power. It was not surrender. It was witness posture. Trent beckoned Eli forward with 2 sharp motions. "Seat in. Set cooldown 16. Prep pour sequence." Eli approached the console like it might shock him. His gloves squeaked against the touch panel as he entered his ID. The system accepted it and displayed the shortened cycle parameter under supervisor override authority. He looked over his shoulder once, eyes searching Jackie's face for a last instruction he could live with. She gave him the only one left. "State your readings on channel before any start command." Trent snapped. "Do not transmit." Dana countered immediately. "Transmit." The conflict hung for a second, raw and public. Eli keyed his radio with a shaking thumb. "Line 3 operator Ramos. Current conditions. C7 humidity 0.38. Vent differential negative 18 kilopascals from expected. Ejector side face temperature 290 plus. Crack at ejector seam active. Override tag present." No one answered for 2 full seconds. Then Ops dispatch came back, voice careful. "Copy, Ramos. Logged." Trent's jaw tightened so hard the tendon stood out in his neck. Cycle team, on my command. Jackie watched the monitor clocks tick towards 6:11, watched the amber OVR tag glow beside numbers that still violated every limit that mattered, and understood that controlled defiance had ended exactly where power pressure always wanted it to end. With the expert moved off the button, the replacement on the stool, and hierarchy pretending that changed the behavior of heat, gas, and steel. Trent lifted his hand like a conductor about to cue an orchestra and said, "Cycle team, on my command. Pour sequence now." Eli's fingers hovered over the start key for a fraction of a second that seemed to stretch across the whole bay. Jackie could see the tremor in his wrist even through the gauntlet glove. Dana stood just behind the supervisor console with her tablet still recording, shoulders squared, chin level, saying nothing because she had already said the line the system refused to honor. Mark stayed at bay too with a sling in hand, staring at the mold face instead of his rigging. Nia held the borescope case against her hip, like she had forgotten to set it down. "Start it," Trent said. Eli pressed the key. The terminal gave a clean confirmation tone, almost cheerful, and the sequence advanced as if this were any ordinary run. Amber changed to green. The robotic pour arm unlocked from neutral and rolled on its rail toward furnace transfer position. Hydraulic servos whined, then steadied into their normal high metallic hum. Conveyor indexing resumed, pallet dogs clacking in measured intervals. The line had the same choreography Jackie had watched thousands of times, and that familiar rhythm made the dread sharper, not softer. Most industrial failures did not announce themselves with chaos first. They started by looking normal from 10 feet away. At 6, 10, and 30 seconds, she glanced at the overhead clocks, and then at C7's hidden values on Dana's mirrored screen. Even under override, the raw numbers stayed exposed in the diagnostics layer. Humidity remained at 0.37. Vent differential on channel 7 remained deeply negative relative to expected. Ejector side temperature still rode above 290. The data had not budged into safe territory. Not one critical threshold had recovered. "Eli," Jackie said, keeping her voice clear and low. "Watch the parting line, not the timer. If you see white vapor, call abort and step back from the rail." Trent snapped without looking at her. "She is off controls. She is off instruction." Dana answered him instead. "Hazard communication is not optional." The ladle transfer carriage locked into position with a hard clunk that echoed under the roof trusses. Above them, Furnace 6 tipped and sent a glowing stream into the calibrated ladle volume. Molten iron moved, like light turned liquid, white-orange at the core and darker at the edges where skin formed and sheared off in brief sparks. Even from behind boundary paint, Jackie felt radiant heat touch the exposed strip of skin between glove cuff and sleeve. Eli read from the console because routine gave him a script to hold on to. "Ladle temp 1362 Celsius, pour mass intolerance, arm path clear." "Proceed," Trent said. Jackie kept her eyes on mold line 3, cavity C7 station, ejector side seam. She knew where pressure first telegraphed itself when vents were compromised. Not at the center where everyone looked, but at weak transitions, parting line corners, patched coating pockets, micro cracks that breathed before they opened. She could smell binder in the exhaust again, that sweet chemical edge under hot metal and hydraulic oil. At this phase, that odor should have been faint to absent. Instead, it sat in the air and thickened. The pour arm advanced in precise increments. Joint motors rotated, paused, corrected and settled into final angle over the mold inlet. A green alignment box on the screen confirmed position lock. The system asked for pour authorization. Eli looked up once, toward Trent. "Authorize," Trent said. Eli pressed authorize. Iron entered the runner. The first second always sounded the same, a smooth, rushing hiss as metal met hot channels. Jackie counted in her head without meaning to, years of process memory running on reflex. 1, 2, 3. She watched vent port 7. 6 seconds in, a faint tremor shivered through the mold deck. Not unusual on its own. 7 seconds, another tremor, slightly heavier. At 8 seconds, the mold emitted a low bass groan that did not belong to normal thermal expansion. It was deeper, chest level, a pressure sound traveling through steel and concrete together. Mark flinched and looked up sharply. Nia's jaw tightened. Jackie spoke immediately. "That tone is trapped gas. Abort pour." Trent pointed at the flow graph. "Flow is stable. Continue," Dana said louder. "Abort criteria met on abnormal acoustic event." "No," Trent replied. "No abort." Eli's hand hovered near the pause command but did not land. He kept reading values, voice thinner now. Runner pressure rising, still within... He swallowed. Within upper band. The pour continued. Jackie shifted one step left for a cleaner sight line down the parting seam. Heat shimmer warped the edges of the mold face. She saw tiny pulses at the seam, barely visible, as if the joint were exhaling. The vent stack coughed in uneven intervals overhead, a stutter where there should have been smooth draw. "Eli," she said, "call off breakout before auto cue." Trent slammed his palm on the supervisor console rail. "No one is calling off anything." At 22 seconds, a thin jet of white vapor shot from the parting line near C7, high and fast, then vanished. A second jet followed from a point closer to the ejector corner. That was the visual she had warned about. Binder gas and steam finding pinhole exits under pressure. It looked small. It was not small. "White vapor on seam," Eli called over radio, voice cracking. "White vapor observed." Ops dispatch came back instantly this time. Line 3, confirmed condition severity. Dana keyed in. Confirmed abnormal. Recommend immediate abort and clear zone. Trent cut across both channels. Condition controlled. Continue sequence. Jackie turned to Dana. "Hit bay warning horn." Dana reached for the local alarm toggle and triggered 3 rapid blasts. The tone ripped through the bay higher than machine noise, unmistakable. Workers in adjacent stations looked over, then began backing away from Line 3 perimeter, pulling each other by sleeves and shoulders, hard hats turning toward exits by instinct. 30 seconds after pour initiation, the mold gave another groan, louder, followed by a sharp ping from inside the block. Then another, then a rattling series like bolts shaken in a steel drum. Jackie knew that sound from simulation audio, and one old incident recording she wished she had never heard. Gas pockets were moving under a shell that was no longer behaving as a single piece. "Terminate pour," she shouted. Trent shouted back, "Finish the pour. We are not freezing metal mid-run." Freezing metal beats detonating at breakout. He ignored her and barked to Eli. "Hold sequence. Complete fill." Eli's breathing was audible now over his mic. "Fill at 92%, 95, complete." He looked at Trent again, then at the countdown to breakout cue. "Auto breakout in 15 seconds. "Do not engage breakout," Jackie said. Trent answered with a flat, hard command. Engage on schedule. Dana stepped toward Eli, voice direct. Ramos, you have authority to stop. Trent moved between them, not touching, just occupying space. He has authority to follow his supervisor. The timer fell through 10 seconds. 9, 8. Jackie watched the seam and saw the first hairline brightness move under the casting skin, a zigzag glow that appeared and vanished as gas pressed against thinning structure. She heard herself speak with a calm she did not feel. Pressure is under the skin. If those arms hit now, it will unzip. Eli whispered almost to himself, I don't want to do this. Trent heard him. Do it. At 6:11:45, 45 seconds after pour initiation, Eli pressed breakout engage. The breakout arms advanced, jaws locking onto the casting with hydraulic force, calibrated for normal shell integrity. For a fraction of a second, everything held. Then a sound like heavy canvas ripping through a microphone tore across Bay 2. A fracture raced along the casting skin in a jagged line from ejector side corner toward the crown, fast enough to track as light and not as shape. Jackie saw the seam bulge outward as trapped superheated gas found the new path. The failure completed in less than 3 seconds. First came the flash, white-orange from inside the shell, brighter than furnace glare and wrong in location. Then came the pressure wave, a blunt hit that slapped Jackie in the chest and shoved her back into the guard post. Fragments of shell and mold-facing material blasted outward across the floor. Most struck guards and shielding with metallic hammer blows. Some punched through thinner panels and ricocheted into railings and tool carts. One fragment shattered the control room side glass in a spiderweb burst, then drove through, scattering monitors and sending sparks from severed cables. Eli disappeared behind the console as the blast front reached Station Center. His body went backward into the guardrail, hard enough to bend it inward and drop him to his side. Mark ducked and threw an arm over his helmet as debris rattled off the rigging frame around him. Nia hit the deck behind the hardness station, tablet skidding across concrete. Hydraulic lines on the breakout carriage ruptured at a coupling where fragment impact sheared the fitting. A fine mist of fluid sprayed into hot surfaces and ignited in a brief orange fireball that rolled upward, not large, but violent enough to lick the lower cable trays before retracting. Heat hit Jackie's face shield like an open oven door, multiplied by 10. She felt it through jacket and sleeves, a blunt thermal shove that forced her to turn her shoulder and crouch. Then the suppression system triggered. Overhead nozzles dropped foam in dense white sheets, swallowing the flame and coating the carriage, rails, and floor in seconds. The fireball collapsed under the blanket, leaving hissing steam and the ringing metallic aftersound of stress-relieved steel. Strobes began flashing red in synchronized pulses. The evacuation alarm switched from horn blasts to continuous tone. Jackie pushed off the guard post and moved toward Eli, boots slipping once on fresh foam before she caught herself on a handrail. Eli, talk to me. He groaned and rolled partly onto his back. Visor cracked, jacket scorched at the right sleeve and shoulder. I'm here, he said, breath ragged. I'm here. Stay down. She checked for immediate hazards first, exactly as training required. No active flame, no live arcing cable in his contact zone, no moving machinery. Breakout carriage had faulted to stop. Poor arm was frozen mid-retreat with emergency lock engaged. Good. She keyed her radio. Medical response to line 3 now. 3 injured confirmed, thermal exposure and impact trauma. Suppression active, fire knocked down. Dana was already on channel with dispatch and plant emergency team, relaying location and access route. Use north aisle. South side obstructed by debris. Bring burn kits and spine board. Trent stood 5 meters away, drenched in foam from shoulders down, staring at the split casting shell clamped in broken jaws. His mouth moved once with no sound. The smug certainty that had carried him all morning was gone, replaced by a flat disbelief that looked almost childlike in the strobing red light. He took one step toward the console, then stopped, as if his body had forgotten what task came next. "Trent," Dana shouted, "emergency stop verification, do it." He blinked, then slapped the master stop palm button on the supervisor panel. Red confirmed across all Line 3 drives. Late, but now complete. Jackie turned to Mark, who was kneeling by Nia. "Status?" "She's conscious," Mark called back. "Arm burned through sleeve, maybe sprain. She can talk." Nia lifted her uninjured hand and gave a shaky thumbs up without trying to stand. "I'm okay. Don't let me move yet." "Copy," Jackie said. "Stay put." 2 operators from Bay 1 arrived with portable extinguishers and halted at the boundary when they saw suppression foam still flowing. Jackie signaled them to hold perimeter and keep bystanders back. Fragment heat could linger in pockets. Steam could hide trip hazards. The air smelled of burnt hydraulic fluid, wet refractory, and scorched paint, layered over the iron smell that never quite left a foundry floor. By 6:14, less than 3 minutes after breakout engage, plant emergency medics came through North Aisle in full PPE, pushing a cart and carrying soft stretchers. Jackie gave rapid handoff. Patient 1, Eli Ramos. Impact to guardrail. Probable, burns right upper extremity. Conscious oriented. Patient 2, Nia Patel. Localized thermal injury left forearm. Possible wrist involvement, conscious. Patient 3, Mark Delaney. Minor shrapnel strike to thigh guard and heat exposure. Ambulatory. She pointed to each location in sequence, then stepped back, so treatment lanes stayed clear. The medics cut scorched sleeves where needed, applied cooled dressings, checked airway and vitals, and secured Eli with cervical precaution because of the backward impact. No one was screaming now. The loudest sounds were alarm tones, radio traffic, and the constant hiss of foam runoff hitting hot steel. Jackie finally looked at the wrecked cell without moving toward it. The casting shell had torn open exactly along the path she predicted, zipper-like fracture from ejector side across the crown. The C7 area was blown outward, vent staining spread in a fan pattern over what remained of the mold face. Control room glass hung in cracked sheets, and one monitor still flickered blue through a web of fractures. The line was not just stopped. It was broken. Dana walked to Jackie's side, face pale under the hard hat, voice tight but steady. "You called it." Jackie kept her eyes on the damaged mold. "Physics called it. We just wrote it down first." Behind them, Trent lowered himself onto an overturned tote as if his knees could no longer hold him. He stared at his foam-covered hands, then at the supervisor console where the amber override tag had gone dark under emergency lockout. He said one sentence, barely above the alarm tone. It was 8 minutes. Jackie heard him. She did not answer. The mold floor answered for her with twisted steel, shattered glass, and 3 workers on medical stretchers, while the suppression foam kept falling like blunt white rain. The suppression foam kept falling like blunt white rain, and Jackie moved only when the lead medic nodded her out of the treatment lane. She backed toward the yellow boundary stripe, pulled her radio closer to her mouth, and started the accountability roll, the way she had practiced it every quarter, and hoped never to run for real. Line 3 personnel check. Respond with location and condition. Voices came back through static and alarm tone, one by one, clipped and strained, but present. Eli was with medics, conscious. Nia was conscious and stable. Mark was ambulatory. 2 Bay 1 responders were uninjured. Dana answered from the supervisor console. Trent answered last, voice flat. Present. No one was missing. At 6:17, the emergency coordinator from Bay 4 arrived, took command, and ordered full lockout-tagout verification on every energy source, touching mold line 3. Hydraulic pressure was bled down first, then electrical isolation, then furnace transfer interlocks. A maintenance electrician photographed each disconnect handle with timestamp overlay, while a second tech hung red danger tags and logged serial numbers. Jackie watched them work and felt the adrenaline drain into a colder state, the one where details became duty. Catastrophe did not end when noise stopped. It ended when evidence was preserved, and no second failure could chain off the first. Dana came over with foam on her sleeves and a tablet full of open forms. I need your initial witness statement now while sequence memory is fresh. Jackie nodded once. I'll give it in event order. She stood beside a steel column, face shield up, and dictated with measured cadence. Warning indicators at C7, moisture value, vent differential, ejector side temperatures, crack growth, hold initiation time, supervisor override activation, alarm suppression, radio transmissions, abnormal acoustic cue at 8 seconds, white vapor at 22, breakout command at 45, rupture, hydraulic mist ignition suppression deployment. Dana did not paraphrase. She took every term exactly and read each line back for confirmation. When they reached the refusal language, Jackie repeated it word for word. Refusal tied to documented mechanism. Active binder outgassing plus insufficient vent evacuation may cause pressure accumulation beneath casting skin and rupture during breakout. Donna marked it as a direct quote. 10 meters away, the emergency coordinator asked Trent for his account. Trent's first sentence was procedural, not emotional. I executed production recovery override under supervisor authority due schedule risk. The coordinator asked, Did safety concur? Trent said, Safety disagreed. Another question, Did operator object? Trent glanced once at Jackie, then back to the clipboard. Operator objected. He did not argue with the facts in that moment, and that silence was its own admission. By 6:28, plant fire response confirmed no active flame and no secondary ignition risk. Suppression flow was cut. Steam lifted off the mold face in wavering columns, and the bay's normal industrial sounds began to return in fragments. Distant forklift beeps, crane trolley rumble, the dull hum of ventilation. On line 3, everything stayed still. The casting shell remained clamped in distorted breakout jaws like a split bell. The maintenance superintendent, Raul Mendez, entered with a laser scanner and 2 reliability engineers, all in fresh PPE. He surveyed damage in concentric zones, calling out categories while an assistant logged. Primary mold face compromised, breakout carriage structural deformation, 2 hydraulic circuits lost, servo cable tray impact, control room glazing failure, HMI bank destroyed, guardrail breach at station center. He paused at the ejector side, crouched, and looked at the fracture path. Rupture origin aligns with C7 seam. Jackie heard him and felt no vindication, only the heavy confirmation of a result she had spent an hour trying to prevent. At 6:41, medical transport moved Eli and Nia out through North Aisle, with Mark walking beside a medic for follow-up imaging and burn evaluation. Eli caught Jackie's eye as they passed. His face was pale, lips tight against pain, but he stayed alert. "I should have stopped it," he said through the oxygen mask strap. "You called the readings on record," Jackie answered. "Hold on to that." He gave a small nod before the stretcher turned the corner. Plant management assembled in the control room annex by 7 o'clock. Operations manager, HR lead, legal liaison on speakerphone, and the corporate EHS director joining remotely. Jackie, Dana, and Trent were separated for interviews. Jackie's session lasted 50 minutes and ran like deposition triage. She provided screenshots from her terminal cache, confirmed the sample cup label and storage location, and identified who witnessed each checkpoint. When legal asked if she had used emotionally charged language towards supervision, she replied, "I used mechanism language, threshold language, and SOP language." Dana confirmed the same. The sample cup from C7 drain, tagged L3C70559, was retrieved in front of 2 witnesses, seal integrity verified, and placed into a transfer cooler with custody form signatures at every handoff. Borescope stills were exported from Nia's tablet backup because her primary tablet had cracked during blast impact. Maintenance remote logs from 557 were pulled from server archive and hashed to prevent later editing disputes. The system kept everything in plain metadata, user IDs, timestamps, override reason code, alarm suppression command, radio channel captures. None of it sounded dramatic. All of it carried weight. 3 days earlier, those records would have looked like administrative clutter. By the end of that morning, they had become the spine of liability. At 8:12, corporate EHS made the mandatory notification calls. State Occupational Safety Office, Workers' Compensation Carrier, and the insurer's industrial property hotline. Jackie did not hear those calls directly, but outcomes reached the room within minutes. The state office assigned an inspection team for same-day arrival because hospitalization threshold had been met. Workers' Comp opened 3 claims immediately and requested injury mechanism statements by end of shift. The property insurer issued a claim number and a reservation of rights notice in the same email, a legal posture that meant coverage was being reviewed under potential intentional act exclusions. The phrase looked dry on screen. In plant terms, it meant the company could be paying much more of this loss out of pocket. By mid-morning, Raoul's preliminary damage sheet hit the executive inbox. $6.9 million in immediate equipment and structural impact before forensic teardown. That figure rose as hidden losses surfaced. The H13 mold set was unrecoverable. The breakout carriage frame required replacement, not repair. Cable bundles and 2 overhead trays had heat and fragment damage beyond safe reuse. Control room electronics were total losses. Concrete anchor points beneath station center showed spall and needed engineering sign-off. Every added line item pushed the number up. At 11:35, after laser scan, overlays, and vendor calls, finance revised the estimate to $14.6 million projected total loss for direct damage and restoration. Operations added 11 weeks minimum downtime for Line 3, based on lead times for replacement carriage components, mold tooling, electrical rebuild, and recertification testing. 11 weeks translated into missed tonnage that downstream machining could not absorb. Sales pulled contract language and flagged 19 penalty exposures tied to delayed delivery windows. Small shortcut. Massive invoice. Exactly the arithmetic Jackie had seen too many times in other plants' incident summaries. She sat through that briefing in a borrowed conference room chair with dried foam stiffening her jacket and listened to the numbers land across faces that had argued for speed all quarter. No one in management called it bad luck. No one called it unforeseeable. The internal language turned to deviation, override pathway, control failure, words that tried to keep emotion out of accountability. By the second half of the day, the external investigators began arriving in hard hats and clean notebooks. State safety officers photographed the override screen history, interviewed witnesses independently, and requested the full SOP revision trail to establish whether the 24-minute standard had been communicated and enforced. One inspector asked Jackie, "Were you trained to challenge unsafe direction?" She answered, "Yes, and to document it with mechanism." He looked up from his notes and said, "Good. Keep saying exactly that." Insurance forensic engineers came in parallel and focused on causality exclusions. They pulled event logs, reviewed alarm suppression, and measured vent manifold obstruction at branches 4, 5, and 7. Fouling and residue buildup matched the deferred maintenance ticket Jackie had cited. When asked for the work order history, maintenance produced the deferral note with cost line. Manifold replacement postponed. Projected spend $9,800. The forensic lead circled that number on his printout and wrote beside it, "Known degradation prior to incident." That annotation mattered because claim denial arguments often turned on foreseeability and deliberate override. Here, the chain was explicit. Known vent impairment, explicit hazard identification, formal hold, documented refusal, supervisor bypass, then failure at predicted phase. The prevailing legal framework did not need speculation. It had sequence. By 1610, the plant issued a controlled internal memo. Line 3 offline pending investigation and rebuild. No fatalities. 3 employees receiving medical care. Full cooperation with regulators. The message was accurate and carefully narrow. What it did not say, but everyone on the floor understood, was that schedule pressure had collided with a non-negotiable process limit and lost. Jackie left the interview room only to be called back for a final evidence verification. Her 549 hold entry, her 559 sample label, her 605 refusal statement, and her 611 hazard warning transmission were all authenticated against server time and radio archives. HR asked whether she wanted union representation for subsequent disciplinary review. She answered, "I want the record complete." HR marked her as witness status, not subject status, pending final findings. At 1800, with daylight fading through high windows, Dana forwarded Jackie the email thread she had sent before the blast. Hold notice, override timestamp warning, and escalation to safety, HR, and corporate EHS. Sent. Delivered. Read receipts from 2 recipients. No one had intervened before 6/11. That gap would become its own consequence, not a dramatic collapse, but a slow institutional one. Compliance response time audits, management escalation reform, and a reputational bruise that procurement partners would remember longer than any press statement. 36 hours after the blast, The delayed consequence arrived exactly where paperwork said it would. The insurer converted reservation of rights into partial denial language for losses connected to deliberate safety override against written SOP and recorded expert objection. Expert. Corporate counsel shifted from claim recovery planning to damage containment. Budget committees froze discretionary capital. Lenders requested incident briefings. None of it exploded. It accumulated. When Jackie returned to the floor for a supervised personal item pickup, Line 3 stood behind temporary fencing and red tags, foam residue gone, damage stark under white work lights. The cracked control room glass had been removed, leaving an open frame like a missing tooth. A board near the entrance listed immediate actions in black marker: incident investigation active, regulator hold, rebuild schedule pending, retraining mandatory. Underneath, someone had written one line from the SOP in block letters: minimum controlled cool down 24 hours. She read it, clipped her locker key to her belt, and walked out through North Aisle while night shift filed in quieter than usual. The plant had spent months chasing minutes. Now it would spend 11 weeks rebuilding what 8 stolen minutes had taken apart. By the following Tuesday at 9:07, Jackie sat in conference room B under fluorescent panels that hummed almost as loud as a Mold Bay fan, with Dana on her left, a union steward on her right, and Trent Holloway across from them at the long laminate table. A wall monitor showed the incident timeline in minute-by-minute blocks. No one called it an argument anymore. It was an accountability hearing, recorded, transcribed, and locked. The operations director opened with a single sentence: "This proceeding determines disciplinary action and corrective assignment based on documented conduct during the Line 3 event." Corporate EHS, joining on video, shared the evidence index. Every physical item Jackie had touched that morning appeared on screen with custody status. Sample cup L3-C7-0559. Received at accredited lab. Seal intact. Analyzed. Borescope stills from Nia's backup tablet. Hash verified, no alteration. Contact probe readings. Cross-checked against device memory. Vent manifold differential logs. Server audit complete. Radio captures, transcribed, and time-synced. Nothing was missing, nothing was misplaced. The legal liaison clicked into the lab report first. Cup L3-C7-0559 contained elevated water content and volatile phenolic decomposition products, consistent with active binder outgassing beyond expected cooldown phase. This confirms the hazard basis for hold. Trent shifted in his chair. That cup sat around before testing. Dana answered before Jackie had to. It did not. Chain of custody signatures at every handoff. Temperature log uninterrupted. The liaison nodded. Correct. No integrity breach. Next came the borescope images. The crack branching at the ejector side filled the monitor. Then a metallurgist's annotation highlighted fresh propagation edges. Thermal fatigue growth was active pre-incident, he said over speaker, not cosmetic. Combined with vent impairment and shortened cooldown, this increased local pressure vulnerability. Trent tried a new angle. Cracks exist on every line. We run with them all the time. Jackie finally spoke, voice flat and precise. Not with red moisture, degraded draw, and forced 16-minute cooling. Not together. The operations director raised a hand. Mr. Holloway, did you or did you not execute production recovery override at 6:08 with active red warning conditions? Trent looked at the table, then up. Yes. Did safety concur? No. Did the assigned operator refuse on mechanism grounds? She refused. Did you suppress alarm acknowledgement requirements? A pause stretched 3 beats too long. Yes. The room stayed quiet after that because there was nothing left to interpret. Physics had already interpreted it in steel and glass. Now policy was catching up in writing. At 10:12, HR read the disciplinary finding aloud. Foreman Trent Holloway is terminated effective immediately for gross misconduct, deliberate override of safety controls without required concurrence, retaliatory labor reassignment under active hazard hold, and falsified operational characterization of safety refusal as insubordination without full context. She slid an envelope across the table. Access revocation is immediate. Security escort will follow. Trent did not reach for the envelope right away. He looked at Jackie with the same hard stare he had used at the console boundary. But this time, it had no leverage behind it. You got what you wanted. Jackie held his gaze. I wanted a 24-minute cooldown and a live crew. You chose the rest. Security stepped in, polite and firm. Trent stood, took the envelope, and walked out without another word. The operations director turned to Jackie and Dana. Your witness status is reaffirmed. No disciplinary action. Back pay on the suspension period is approved. Dana exhaled for what felt like the first time all morning. Jackie only nodded once. Vindication in industry rarely felt triumphant. It felt like the absence of one more lie in the record. At 13:40 the same day, Jackie joined the insurer conference call from the EHS office, headset pressing against hair still smelling faintly of machine oil. On screen were corporate finance, outside counsel, and the carrier's claims manager. The manager spoke in controlled legal language that still landed like a dropped ingot. After forensic review, the carrier confirms partial denial of losses directly attributable to deliberate safety override against written SOP, with documented expert objection and supervisory suppression of active alarms. Finance asked, quantify covered versus denied. The manager replied, covered certain structural and emergency response components, subject to deductible. Denied, portions linked to intentional procedural breach and related business interruption increments. Detailed schedule is in your inbox. Counsel muted, swore under his breath, then unmuted and kept his tone neutral. Understood. Jackie watched faces and tiny video tiles do the same math she had done on the floor. Saved 8 minutes on paper. Bought 7-0 consequences in reality. No one laughed this time when she talked about vent pressure. At 8:05 Thursday, state inspectors returned for the closing conference in a room that still had taped floor marks from earlier evidence staging. The lead inspector placed a printed packet in front of plant leadership and read the summary without drama. Citation package includes willful violation related to supervisory override of safety interlock under known hazardous conditions and serious violations for deferred maintenance contributing to vent underperformance. Corrective action deadlines are mandatory. He turned one page and looked directly at the operations director. Your response time gap on internal escalation emails is now part of the required abatement plan. 36 hours without intervention on a documented high-risk override warning is not acceptable. That closed another open thread. Jackie's pre-incident email to safety, HR, and corporate EHS was no longer a forgotten warning in an inbox. It became a compliance benchmark with a clock attached. Escalations had to be acknowledged within 15 minutes and resolved or elevated within 1 hour, or the system would auto-page executive duty officers. Slow institutional failure now had a timer. After the conference, Mark found Jackie by the locker aisle, hard hat tucked under his arm, expression tighter than usual. He had carried that loaded look since the blast morning, the one that said he had more to say and hated saying it late. "I should have spoken up sooner," he said. "Last week, when maintenance deferred that manifold job, I heard Trent tell Raoul to push it past month end, so KPI stayed clean. I thought it was above my pay grade." Jackie leaned against the locker door and answered without softness or cruelty. "It was never above your safety grade." He nodded, eyes on the concrete. "I gave that statement to inspectors this morning. Full detail." "Good," she said. "Late truth still counts." Nia settled her own thread 2 days later, forearm wrapped but healing, standing in the quality lab doorway with her stylus clipped to her pocket. "The tablet you thought was gone?" Data recovery pulled all burst frame images from 2 seconds before rupture. You can see the seam breathing near C7 and the first vapor jet. She handed Jackie a printed still, timestamp bright in the lower corner. 6/11/22. White vapor at the parting line, exactly where Jackie had pointed. Distinctive detail, resolved and archived. Eli's update came in person on the first Monday of rebuild month. He walked slower, right arm still stiff at full extension. But he walked under his own power into the training room where Jackie was leading the new mandatory module. He waited until the class break, then stood beside the projector cart and spoke quietly. "I transferred to Line 1 after medical cleared me," he said. "I asked for retraining on refusal protocol. I'm not touching an override run again without full concurrence." Jackie studied him for a second, then handed him the laminated card every operator now carried on badge reels. It listed 5 red-line conditions and 1 sentence in bold. "Stop work authority is personal, not borrowed." "You don't need my permission to protect your own skin," she said, "or anyone else's." He clipped the card to his badge and gave a short nod. That look he had thrown her at 6:08, the one searching for rescue, finally paid off as a choice he owned himself. By the second week of rebuild, Line 3 looked less like a crime scene and more like a machine again. New vent manifold installed and pressure tested. Cavity seats resurfaced. H13 mold set replaced. Control room glazing reinforced. Alarm architecture revised, so a supervisor could not suppress acknowledgement without automatic dual notification to safety and EHS. The old OVR tag loophole was gone. The software now stamped "Override Active" across every console in red until independent sign-off cleared it. On recommission day at 5:42, the same minute that had started the whole chain, the floor gathered at boundary paint, while Jackie stood at the primary terminal wearing a fresh shift safety lead patch on her sleeve. She was officially reinstated with full back pay and new authority to halt any cycle across all 3 bays pending review. Dana stood beside her with a clipboard and a look that said this time the system might actually listen to its own alarms. Jackie keyed the first test cycle parameters herself. Cool down, 2400. No exceptions field blank. She looked at the crew and spoke loud enough for the back row over fan noise. "Readings first, pride second. If red appears, we stop. If anyone pressures you to bypass, you log it and call me or Dana. Physics doesn't care about titles." A few people nodded, Mark nodded hardest. The timer started. At minute 16, no one touched anything. At minute 22, humidity on C7 sat under threshold. Vent differentials tracked balanced. Ejector side temperatures entered release range by minute 24 and held. No bass groan, no white vapor, no seam breathing. Just the ordinary mechanical sounds of a process inside limits. Jackie authorized breakout at 24:45. The casting released cleanly. No cheer went up. Foundry crews were not built for ceremony. They just went back to work with shoulders a little lower and eyes a little sharper. That was enough. At shift end, Jackie filed the recommission report and attached every final disposition line for the incident archive. Sample analyzed and closed, images authenticated and stored, external reports answered, citations posted, claims adjudicated, disciplinary actions completed, retraining documented, system modifications verified. No loose artifacts, no dangling calls, no mystery entries. She signed her name at the bottom and shut the terminal down. He tried to save 8 minutes. The plant paid millions. A foreman lost his badge. And the rule everyone had treated as optional came back as law. Cool down is not a suggestion. And steel keeps perfect books.